In this video, we're going to talk about API Gateway, which is an AWS service that enables developers to create, publish, maintain, monitor, and secure APIs at any scale. You can create APIs that access AWS or other web services, as well as data stored in the AWS cloud. API Gateway can be considered a backplane in the cloud to connect AWS services and other public or private websites. It provides consistent RESTful application programming interfaces for mobile and web applications to access AWS services. The benefits of using API Gateway is that it helps you deliver robust, secure, and scalable mobile and web application backends. API Gateway allows you to securely connect mobile and web applications to business logic hosted on AWS Lambda, APIs hosted on Amazon EC2, or other publicly addressable web services hosted inside or outside of AWS. With API Gateway, you can create and operate APIs for back-end services. For example, you don't need to develop and maintain infrastructure to handle authorization and access control, traffic management, monitoring and analytics, version management, and SDK generation. API Gateway is designed for web and mobile developers who want to provide secure, reliable access to back-end APIs for access from mobile apps, web apps, and server apps that are built internally or by third-party ecosystem partners. The business logic behind the APIs can be provided by a publicly accessible endpoint that API Gateway proxies call, or it can be entirely run as a Lambda function. The following image shows just how flexible API Gateway can be. You can see that API Gateway can accept and send traffic to the internet while connecting with numerous AWS and third-party apps and services. With that, let's take a look at some key components that make up API Gateway. And the first is API Gateway itself. API Gateway supports creating, deploying, and managing a RESTful application programming interface, or API, to expose back-end HTTP endpoints, AWS Lambda functions, or other AWS services. There's also the API Gateway API, which is a collection of resources and methods that are integrated with back-end HTTP endpoints, Lambda functions, or other AWS services. The collection can be deployed in one or more stages. API methods are invoked through front-end HTTP endpoints that you can associate with a registered custom domain name. Permissions to invoke a method are granted using IAM roles and policies or API Gateway Lambda authorizers. Next is an API deployment, which is a point-in-time snapshot of your API Gateway API resources and methods. To be available for clients to use, the deployment must be associated with one or more API stages. Next are API endpoints, which are host-named APIs in API Gateway that are deployed to a specific region. Next is method request, or the public interface of an API method in API Gateway that defines the parameters and body that an app developer must send in the requests to access the backend through the API. And finally, there's the method response, or the public interface of an API that defines the status codes, headers, and body models that an app developer should expect from API Gateway. These are just a few of the basic concepts about API Gateway. So if those make sense, let's wrap up this video, and in a future video, we'll spend some time playing with API Gateway in the AWS console.